I want to welcome everybody again to Views from the Field, and this is our 15th session, 15th recorded session. And I say that humbly. I don't say it out of pride, because this dream that began in November has produced all of these sessions, which is amazing to me. I don't quite know how it's happened, but I do appreciate the fact that it's being supported by the teacher community that's gathered here together on Zoom, and particularly by Mark Foreman, who's here with us from Sing to the Mountain Studio. I know we'd all like it if you click the like button if you find it meaningful, and subscribe as we build our subscribership and these sessions grow. Also, we're able to offer these through a donation basis, and at the bottom of the video there is a link for that if you're watching this at some point and choose to make a donation. That's much appreciated too, to support us and keep these going. So today we are joined by our guest teacher, Carolyn Sant Angelo, who is here from where are you, Carolyn? You're in South Florida, but where exactly are you?
South Florida, near Fort Lauderdale.
Oh, okay. And enjoying some nice springtime weather, I imagine.
Absolutely. Blue skies today.
Great. Well, welcome. Grateful to have you here in this time together.
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to say I'm grateful to be here and honored, and grateful also for the opportunity that you're providing to the community for these views from the field, you and Mark and the others. Wanted to share that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And being part of it yourself for all these years too is much appreciated. So in a way of introduction, I've known you for a little while. We've been in mentorship along with your partner, Scott, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So it's been a pleasure. And in your teaching, you've worked for quite a while as an educator, and now as the social and emotional SEL learning mindfulness specialist, leading the SEL team at Broward County Public Schools. So mindfulness in schools, particularly school systems, which Broward County is quite a large one. How large is it in the U.S.?
It's the sixth largest in the country, so we have 230,000 students plus.
Yeah, that is absolutely amazing. So wonderful for mindfulness, wonderful for mindfulness in youth and schools. Congratulations. And as we talked about in mentorship, that was because you were being trained at UCSD to be a certified mindfulness teacher. And you've also trained with the Center for Mind-Body Medicine and co-founded with Scott the Insight Institute. You want to say something about the Insight Institute?
The Insight Institute was really a brainchild of ours so that we could organize and provide mindfulness through the community and create a website, create tools, create some of our offerings, and have a place for people to go and recognize it. So.
Yeah, okay, another blessing for the community. Is there anything I've left out that you want to say in the way of a bio kind of introduction as to who you are? And we know you're much more than that.
Oh, thank you. I guess the only other thing would be that I am on this journey, and it's many stepping stones on the path. And right now I'm standing on one that feel very lucky to be in and honored, and sharing some of that is that, the views from the field, in this case, the view from the field of education and how it relates to mindfulness. It's still surprising that we are where we are in this moment. So, in a good way.
Yeah, thank you. Absolutely. So we're going to move to explore your journey, maybe from the beginning of what led you to be an educator, bringing mindfulness to schools and now Broward County schools. Do you see any connection to that with your own childhood in any way?
What a great question. As I reflect back on my own childhood and how mindfulness showed up in whatever form or fashion, whatever name it might have been given, I grew up on a farm. It was a non-working farm other than a horse that I took care of, but surrounded by nature, woods, a barn to go explore. And mindfulness showed up a lot for me, sitting in, a little alcove I created in the woods as a sanctuary of some sorts, and noticing nature and inviting that in. So it feels like it's always been part of me and part of our family culture, with my father initiating discussions. So why this and why not that? So there was an opportunity to look deeper and farther.
Ah, so where was the farm?
Pennsylvania. So
Okay. Yeah, and what ages were you there until?
I was there all of my childhood. I was lucky to have that, with
Hmm.
the streams and the pond and the manure and all those other good things.
Yeah. You mentioned your father. What did he do?
He was a lawyer and a
Hmm.
businessman. And in his story, he had wanted to be a priest at one time. And I had gone to Catholic school, wanted to be a nun because that was the aspiration model that I was presented, um, and ended up going into education through the years. So
Yeah.
with
Oh,
a
what a
spiritual parallel.
deep inner journey, starting with your father and a way into inquiry, both personal and philosophical and theological. So, where did that switch, that transition happen from moving towards the nunnery to education? To,
uh, I, you find your way with, in my case, things that fit and things where I made a difference. And one of my deep passions is to support and provide for children. And so, working at a summer camp in college and finding that connection was there, and it was fulfilling, but also I felt like I made a difference and had an impact. So, switched into education, and here we are 30 years later of being in the classroom and now in a different role, working with the district. But throughout those 30 years, finding that mindfulness was always there, in whatever form, to bring into, how am I as a teacher? How are the students? What's needed? Things like that.
yeah, so mindfulness was there naturally on the farm, and then it was there within the family and your own aspirations. And this switch occurs, and you move to education. You're called towards working with children from the days at the camp. And where does the mindfulness get formalized into what we know it as now in terms of our programs or our work?
Mm. So for me, the formal part of it, attending some workshops in the summer of 2007. There's an organization, Summer Unitarian Universalist Institute, Southern Unitarian Universalist Institute, and attended some mindfulness classes through them, and then now providing some even over the past few summers, and creating that kind of curiosity and cultivating that desire to learn more. So attended a mindfulness-based self-compassion course when I was struggling with some low-grade depression, and found that to really be valuable as far as elevating and giving me the tools so that I could self-regulate more. And with that came this celebration that this is so valuable and so important, from my own experience, but also the other things that I'm learning from others and research that I couldn't help but want to provide it to children. So connected with an organization then of Mindful Kids Miami, which some of you may have heard of. They're providing mindfulness-based trainings, MBSR, and mindfulness teacher trainings throughout the community. So I went through their trainings and wanted to take that further and became part of their faculty. Still part of their faculty. In fact, did a community session last week on Earth Day, bringing mindfulness for ourselves and our planet. But that formal part then brought me to wanting to be a trainer of MBSR, Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction. Pursuing that with my partner, Scott May, and looking at programs, and we landed with University of California, San Diego, and we're joyously connected with Alan, with you, as part of that training and becoming a facilitator, continuing on that journey still.
Yes, you're lucky to have each other. And it's another question I have, which is, what is it like to be yoked to another mindfulness teacher as a partner?
So a lot of the work that I do is collaborative. And as a classroom teacher, you often are in this individual island. So when I look at, as a, building years and years of these structures and strategies that are internal and independent, to then start to collaborate more and more over these past years, working with Scott is exceptional. And yes, I'm married to him for a reason, but there's also that ability to communicate and work together, to plan together, to debrief and look at ways that we could improve or learn from what happened. There's a joy to that, and there's a challenge to that as well, where you have to be aware of the steps of the dance, so to speak, where you want to be respectful and honoring of what their parts are and what your parts are. So that takes, you don't learn samba on the first night of a dance class. So we're continuing that. Well, maybe some of you do. I don't know. It takes me a little longer.
Yeah. Well, I found you both to be very skilled teachers and people with a lot of wisdom, so I'm sure you're able to negotiate that dance quite smoothly. Well, that's amazing. Not all of us have a co-teacher that lives with us, so it's a real blessing, I think. What is it then that brings you to moving into Broward schools? How did that develop?
When I look back of my years in the classroom and the different opportunities I've had, from working with affluent communities to Title I communities where free and reduced lunch is the norm, to highly rigorous programs like Cambridge and ACE, to my last classroom opportunity was called Holistic Horticulture, Growing Inside and Out. So we did gardening and social emotional learning and mindfulness every day. And it worked. It worked in the sense that students were developing skills, not immediately. There was a lot of resistance, but that's part of it. But to see them start to use language that's more self-compassionate or more collaborative or more aware of what's going on. Notice your impulses. They used to make fun of me, but then they would be using that with each other. So it was just that part of it continued, where I wanted to bring more. I wanted to have a wider impact using my skills and the ability to kind of communicate what is out there and how this could help. So aligned it with a school system. Luckily, I was in a school system where there was a commitment from leadership, from the then superintendent and the then chief academic officer, that found that these were vital for life skills, but also for academic skills. So yes, life skills clearly, but how do we connect that to the business we're in, which is education? So how do we bring that? And there was that commitment and that correlation, continuing. So.
Yeah. So how did that then unfold to move forward through the school system?
There, in Broward County Public Schools, you may or may not be familiar with the history that we have here of tragedy. 4 years ago, Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School had the mass shooting and the trauma that reverberated throughout the community, directly and indirectly. Mindfulness conversations and grants were in place prior to that. But when that occurred and there was such a need for support, the commitment, the funding, the grants came in for lots of reasons and lots of processes that we were able to work with different organizations and set this up as a priority. So Scott and I were on sabbatical that year, and I can come back to tell you a little bit of that story, but the school system put in place different programs such as the Center for Mind-Body Medicine and a commitment to bringing 10 minutes of mindfulness and social emotional learning a day, so that there was an explicit opportunity, a strategic plan. Now, something like that doesn't change overnight, and it's still in process of a continuum of with targets at the end of where we hope to be, where we are, where we were. So it's a continually growth and continuous improvement. So that opened the door for me personally when I came back from sabbatical to be committed and available as a trained MBSR facilitator, and then going through the training eventually with Center for Mind-Body Medicine on their trauma-informed community building, mindfulness and experiential practices there as well. So the fact that a school system has to be very sensitive that they're providing research-based practices, MBSR, is one that rises to the top, if not to the top, as well as the Center for Mind-Body Medicine. So that research-based or evidence-based justification is really a strong, it makes it a strong advocate for whatever programs are put in place.
And how has the community reacted to it or holds it? And is there dissension by any of the parents or any pushback on it?
That's a great question. There's so much about mindfulness, we hear it being more and more mainstreamed, but there can be misconceptions with that. And the definition can be very broad or diluted a little bit on the periphery. I don't even know what that meant, but that there's, if we look at the research-based parts of it and the benefits, then there's a clear core. So when you have leadership at the top that's committed, and you have buy-in from teachers, staff, and students, not all, but generally, and there's a vast support from the community. Now, are there folks that either question, need more information, are against it? Absolutely, absolutely. But it's not the norm. And what we're finding when we look at some of our program usage over time, it continues to grow. We've doubled in some cases some of the programs from last year to this year, from the year before. So one of the things to address that is we came up with mindfulness guidelines in Broward County Public Schools. And we collaborated with others in the community, professional organizations, and simple things like it's invitational. That a teacher can't say, you are going to sit here and be quiet and pay attention. That's not what this is about. The math class, we'll speak to that in another webinar. But in this case, it's invitational. It's also where it's secular, so to not bring in any religious connotations or even some of the history in this case. Not saying that there isn't a time or place for it, but we're trying to prevent those barriers and bring in that opportunity to find those resources and cultivate those tools. So one other key tool, a key guideline is that there's no right or wrong experience. You aren't necessarily meant to relax, although this might happen, but it might be the opposite. So to normalize, and you bring in equanimity in the practice you did with us today, that this experience is yours. You're the expert of this experience is one of the things that I use repeatedly. So.
Sounds like you've grown into addressing any possible issues people might have. I think it's really, really an important question and part of this dialogue for anybody who's watching that might be interested in bringing the work into their school or school system. So just to stay with it a little bit here, did you draw on the work being done in the UK in the schools at all and any of their models?
We did not. We looked at some of the connections more so with social and emotional learning. So that's that one of the foundational pieces for SEL is through CASEL, Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, a national, maybe international organization that is a nonprofit that provides a lot of resources for SEL. And the 5 components, if I can just dive a little deeper into that, the 5 core competencies of SEL are self-awareness and self-management. So you'll hear the word awareness, okay? Mm-hmm. Social awareness and relationship skills, awareness again, and then responsible decision-making. So those are the 5 core competencies. So often the way I present this is that mindfulness is the foundation for SEL, and then SEL is the foundation for academic learning, because you need that awareness, you need that ability to see, where am I in this moment with writing this essay? Am I frustrated? Do I have resilience to bounce back when it gets hard? Am I managing when I'm working with a collaborative group to do a science fair project? Am I regulating my own emotions when I really want to push forward, but I need to listen and have that empathy on what others are going through? So those pieces, I think, really put it together as a puzzle pieces together for me. So that's really the model that we attach to more.
Okay, wonderful. 2 questions. One, where would somebody go for support within maybe the model you're developing to find out more about it? Or anywhere else?
Absolutely. So they can contact me directly, Carolyn.Sant Angelo at browardschools.com, and I will help find the right resources. We have some toolkits built in technologically for SEL and mindfulness, for families, for students, and some of our resources are up there. Some of the programs that we've partnered with are available there as well.
Well, thank you for offering that. I think that is a gift if anybody out there happens upon this and they would like to do something in their school. So what is the program then that is creating this foundation to develop awareness, mindfulness?
There is within Broward County Public Schools, there's a strategic plan. And part of that is an SEL strategic plan. And that has different subcommittees because it's not just in one area of a school system, it's really networked throughout how you do professional learning, how leadership is developed, what goes on in the classroom, the school culture of caring, things like that. So the strategic plan embeds it throughout the district. And mindfulness is one of those subcommittees. And when we have professional development, there's a mindfulness practice, and here's the benefits of mindfulness, and here's how it connects. We have at our school board meetings, the students, we're working with a student mindfulness ambassadors. So the students of all ages will come in at one point or another once a month and lead a mindfulness practice with the school board members and the superintendent. So Tuesday, I have a student coming in to do mindful eating with the school board. And we've had some where elementary kiddos are coming in and they're doing, we're going to pick fruit and then we're going to smash the fruit and make jam. And then we're going to do an imagery of eating the fruit that we picked. So it's quite engaging to watch the adults learn from the students in this model. So we talk about top down, here's the bottom up where the students are guiding them.
Yeah. And where do the parents come in?
The parents come in with the presentations and the communications that we have. Last week, we did 2 virtual parent universities. And so over 400 parents were engaged, and we start off with the kickoff from the school board and the superintendent, and then mindfulness comes in. And mindfulness is brought up throughout the program. In this case, we're talking about how SEL and mindfulness wrap the summer experience during what we call our summer school. And so the parents are engaged in it that way, and resources are available. The partners that we have provide, parents can sign up and register for these tools to listen to a mindfulness practice with their families, and to guide some of those conversations as well.
Oh, wonderful parent universities. So I'm a parent and I'm interested in what my child's learning in terms of mindfulness, and maybe I'm stressed from my work and I say, I need this too. Where specifically are they guided? Let's say they want to take an MBA, you feel an MBSR program might be best for them, or MSc. How are they guided?
There are connections with the Center for Mind-Body Medicine. One of the things that they do is they train the trainers, and those trainers then provide either what's called a workshop, like a 1-hour kind of summary and an experience, a check-in. And they could also sign up for what's an 8-week skills group, of mind-body medicine skills group. So those are put out there where they can sign up and engage in that. And the other support throughout the community could grow more. As we develop what happens inside the school, the castle graphic is a wheel that builds out of all the different stakeholders. And so the classrooms, the students, the leadership in schools, and then building out to the community. So we're there, but could we improve? Absolutely, because that need is so vast. And we also have to be very careful with a large system, the infrastructure, the red tape, it's still there, to make sure that we're providing a partnership that has those contracts and the research-based parts. So it's not simple, but it will continue to evolve with it.
Yeah, may your work continue to grow. So in the way I understand it, embedded in the SEL component is, the SEL program is this mindfulness component. And it's different than, let's say, somebody was to go in and bring in the Mindful Schools program, a complete program or something like that. So how do these components fit in the day of a child's experience in the classroom? And maybe you could give us a few examples of some of the exercises.
Absolutely. So the hope is that students are getting 10 minutes of mindfulness. That's, an official communication, 10 minutes of mindfulness and SEL. And there's different ways to do that, from some plug and play programs to make it very easy for teachers, to then modeling some of the things that we'll do and giving the kids an understanding at the level they need developmentally. So I know I'm going to share something on screen. Let's see if you can see this okay. But one of the analogies that we do, yes, this is my snow globe with a donut inside. But to give the analogy of all the things going on in life that may or may not be stressful for us. So the glitter represents the homework, the getting along with your sibling, having to clean your room or set the table. But if we find that opportunity to pause and let things settle, so you push the pause button, allowing that moment for downshifting. The things can settle, they're still there, but maybe we see a little more clarity. Maybe we see with a little more calmness. And here's those words that I really attach to, is that respond versus react opportunity. And the idea of students being able to do something where they can self-regulate and giving them a few strategies. Here's another one. You may be familiar with this or not, but could be called hand breathing or star breathing. So I'm going to invite you all to try this out. So if you would, with one hand, trace up your thumb, starting with your thumb, and inhale as you trace up, pause, and then exhale as you trace down. And then inhale, continuing, tracing up, and noticing what's showing up for you as you continue this at a rhythm and pace that works for you. Maybe you notice the breath that you're exhaling, or perhaps you notice the sensations of your fingers. Inhaling up and exhaling, breathing out, down. And then we'd invite the students to switch hands and continue, but also that opportunity to share. What did you notice? Did you notice, it tickled a little bit, or I noticed I started to slow down, or whatever their observations. And there's other things that we talk about with younger children from using, maybe some of you are familiar with this. This is a Mindful Kids Miami bear, and it says breathe on there. So giving them that opportunity and the sensation of, as they're inhaling, the bear rising, the buddy rising and falling with their breath. And with high schoolers, even bringing in poetry, if it's the guest house from Rumi, that there's an opportunity to reflect on that as well. There's a few examples, and I know I could zoom into some of these because I'm very passionate about them, but zooming out is just offering this toolkit so that they have that ability to self-manage. And if not, then the teachers, because you've got to start with the teachers to be able to embody that, to have their own skills and noticing where they are if they're triggered, so that they can then help to co-regulate with students if need be as well.
Oh, thank you for showing us the exercises. I want to come back to the teachers in a minute, but I just want to be clear. So this is throughout the range of years in school, from kindergarten through high school?
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing. At what point are you bringing in the snow globe? What age group, and at what point after introducing them to mindfulness might they see that?
For me, I'm a visual learner, so I often bring in some kind of a prop or an analogy for them to visualize. If it's, tides coming in and out on the shore, so for breathing in and out, that kind of comparison that they might have a connection to. So I try to do something each time. Each teacher will do it in their own way. So I guess the answer to that is early on, or when appropriate, or when you feel they need that. So.
Okay, so it's variable. Yeah. Let's come back to the teachers and their training in mindfulness. Is this part of your intention of being a certified teacher in MBSR, to bring them through a 8-week MBSR program?
We have done that through the pandemic. There were multiple times where we offered an MBSR 8-week program. We offered it for free during the pandemic, Scott and myself, and it was vital. I think for me to have that as going through it myself, because every time I go through a different iteration of MBSR, it's just such a rich experience, and I continue to develop and learn. But I see that it was expressed to us, the benefits of those that went through it, the teachers that did go through it. it is challenging. If you're aware of the challenges on the educators currently and the burnout rate and the amount of tasks given to them, to find that commitment of an 8-week, 2+ hours a week and the retreat day, it's a challenge. So that's where chunking it or offering different opportunities, workshops here and there, professional development, it seems to be a little bit more achievable at this time. But Scott and I have offered it at least once every year, actually probably twice every year over the past 3 years, where we've offered MBSR. It may not be that it's through Broward County Public Schools. We don't have that. Remember, we talked about the contract and things like that, but it is offered to the community at large, so teachers can attend. We're also looking at a model where it's, and Mindful Schools offers this kind of steps to it. Let's see if I can get this right. So first it's understanding mindfulness, and then it's teaching mindfully, and then it's teaching mindfulness. So that there are layers of this where, the embodiment, and then bringing it in an application in a classroom or school setting, and then specifically and explicitly bringing it to students. So
Yeah.
that's where I'm heading.
Yeah. I hesitate to ask this because I don't want to put you on the spot. I don't want to discourage any teachers out there who might be part of this program. But what percentage, I'm going to ask it anyways, what percentage of teachers do you feel like reach some sufficient level of understanding, or I don't know if understanding is the right word, embodiment, to be able to bring it in the way that we might, I don't know the right word here either. What might we want? What is, how do you measure it? But
right.
I think you get what I'm getting at here.
Yeah.
Do they get it?
I would say those that have gone through training get it. And I can say that based on the feedback and the anecdotal, the exit surveys, where this has changed my life is a frequent thing, or this has changed how I teach. There's other programs we offer that also do that, such as conscious discipline. Dr. Becky Bailey pulled a lot of research techniques and strategies and created this program that was geared towards parents, young children, and we're scaling it out with middle school. And it talks about the brain states, like Dan Siegel's survival state, the emotional state, flipping the lid, things like that, but to get to the executive state of learning. And I think that's where teachers who've gone through this training get it, that I can't get my students to this part of the brain, the executive state, the cognitive, the memory, the problem solving, because I'm stuck here in the brainstem with the survival state, or I'm stuck in the emotional state where I don't feel like I belong, or I don't feel loved. So I think the teachers get that if they've been exposed to it. And if they're not stuck in survival state, which so many of us are.
Us, yeah. Yeah. What are you hearing from the students?
Oh, I know I'm doing an 8-week skills group with Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School students right now. And there are things that come up in a typical, not even typical, but in a school year that are challenging. And you see the students who are at a particular given time ready, and they see the benefits and they're absorbing it, and they're oh yes, and I did this while I was getting ready for volleyball practice and it really helped me, or I took this exam for certification and I did breathing like 5 times throughout. So I do get some of that feedback, but there's also a percentage where they're still like this, like really, convince me, or I'm not ready for it, or maybe there's trauma in there and we don't know what's absorbing and what they'll carry forward and hear those words maybe later. So again, it's the ones who go through the program, we're getting super positive feedback. A little exit survey, like 4.8 out of 5, things like that. That's the data part of me that I have to have, but I get the sense that there's this appreciation and an opportunity to cultivate those skills, plant those seeds, so they can use it. And I want to use another analogy, if I may, that I've used with students, which is, you have a soda bottle with a cap on, and you have a water bottle with the cap on, and we get shaken up. We get shaken up. And if you have a practice, you can be more like the water bottle when the lid comes off. Maybe it spills out a little bit, but it's more stable, and an opportunity to feel that there's some calmness or clarity. Whereas a soda bottle, when it gets shaken up, all the triggers that happen, all the pressures on us in life, when the lid comes off, it can explode if it's been shaken up. But if you have that practice, like you might, to find that clarity, but also if you have the awareness to know what you're putting in your bottle, what you're putting in. Are you putting in the soda, which can be serving you in some way, but maybe not? Whereas if you're putting in the water, if you're filling your cup with what's needed most. I kind of combined two analogies. I don't know if that made perfect sense, but I guess it's that I get a sense that the students are finding more useful tools, finding the ability to tap in and regulate themselves and modulate themselves when they need be. And the feedback at the end of the programs has been very positive. So fidelity is part of it too.
And no telling how those seeds are going to move in their life later on. Yeah, well, it's such important. Yeah, go ahead.
If I may, Alan, we've got so many beautiful mindfulness teachers on this call, and anybody else who's listening, is to kind of reflect back on your own childhood and what was provided to you as you were developing these skills, or maybe not developing these skills until later on. And I think back, if I had learned these earlier, if this had been part of the education system when I was a child going through school, I think maybe the world would be different. And I'm thinking more like the bottle of water than the soda bottle shaking up. So
yeah. I've had that reflection personally many times, and yes, so it's wonderful work that you're providing. On a bigger picture, is Broward County Schools like the model, would you say, right now for this in the country, or are you drawing from another system as a model?
We draw from some research. We draw from our partners. We're not the only ones doing this. There are smaller systems, larger systems that are embedding SEL. That's being the foundation that's more, I don't want to say popular, but available. And the mindfulness piece, we're in different times today. So I could say that we have other districts that come to us and want to know what we're doing and how we're doing it. But we're also learning from others. So it's kind of a mutual beneficial field of education.
Okay. There's a lot out there. And I remember when we had our Bridging the Hearts and Minds of Youth conferences at UCSD Center for Mindfulness, that it was like a community finding itself at that time, maybe 10 years ago at this point. But I imagine to a large degree that community has found itself, and you're all aware of the other programs out there. Yeah. Where do you personally see it moving, or what would your dream be if this moved forward in a way that you dream about? What would that look like?
There's a few things that come to mind. The first part of your question was, where do I see this going? I would anticipate we're going to have to shore up a little bit. I think things may get rougher before they get smoother. And we are in different times. If you look at politically, or even, we're in Florida, things like that may be part of it. So my hope, my vision for this would be that it continues to grow. And I know that there's also that justification of research, that the data also shows this impact on social emotional learning with mindfulness, which then also leads to that academic learning. There's lots of data that will show, 23% increase on, social and emotional behaviors with this kind of a program implemented. And my hope is that it's more understood, and that misconceptions are dealt with, and that it continues to be integrated in a way that serves. And I love the phrase of healed people heal people, and to do no harm with this along the way. So that's where that research part comes in, because if you're using a research-based program versus a program that could be just grabbed from other places, not to say they're not valuable, but this makes it a pathway which is a little more clear, and in a system such as this could justify it more easily, so that the students have those toolkits, the staff has those resources, and we're cultivating a community that supports themselves individually, but also each other and the planet. Let's bring it all in.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Carolyn. That's a lot of information, and blessed to have that. And I'm sure anybody listening who is interested in bringing mindfulness into schools or as part of an SEL component of what they have, it will be helpful. So I'd like to open this up, if you don't mind, for a few questions from our Zoom community that's gathered here, if anybody has any questions. Take a few moments and see what's here for people, if anything. Okay, Gus's hand. Okay, Gus.
Talk to the hand? I'm kidding. Yeah, thanks, Carolyn. So, as you know, I'm here in South Florida too. And so I have two questions. I think you kind of were hitting on them. I think Alan led you into them, but you were hitting. So what my main question though centers around, since all of this did sort of jump up a lot after the Parkland shootings. And I remember how many people came down to Fort Lauderdale, well-intended, with all kinds of wanting to help, all people wanting to service the victims and the community and all of that. And my concern was a lot of people were coming in, especially international and national people, and they were going to do some things, talk about how good their programs are, and then do something and then get out of town, and then leave everybody sort of stranding there. You're on your own now, go do that. So not saying that anybody did do that, I'm not sure, but I'm just wondering if there's been any sort of follow-up, objective follow-up after all of those programs came in, how the community as a whole has done post the traumatic event in general. Has there been some measure that says this community has actually done pretty well compared to, let's say, the Haiti earthquake or the Katrina people or this or that? And then the second part of the other question I was going to ask, given what Governor DeSantis has been saying, I understood that he said SEL is out, or he's trying to make it a specific target. And I know it's political. I know Broward has a good tendency to push back against the government, thank God. But will that, since SEL is mentioned so much, will this sort of political thing cause a dent in anything at the moment? So thanks.
No, thank you, Gus. Some great questions, and I know I cannot answer all of what you're asking. With the reference to all of the support that we've had over the past 4 years, I can share that the class has graduated. Not to say that there aren't other siblings and folks directly impacted coming through, and one of the main partners we mentioned is the Center for Mind-Body Medicine, which we still have, workings with and a deep partnership with. And research for mindfulness in particular, with SEL in particular, is very challenging because there are so many variables involved. And looking at from one school to another, what is different demographics, something could happen at one school that doesn't happen in another school. So the internal review board for research within our school system is very, very careful. And a lot of things do not get researched because of that, because they're protecting the mental health of the children and of the staff as well. So it's complex. You're asking the right question. Was there a change? Is there an impact over time? And some of those I don't have the answers, but I can share that there are some research things that are in the process of going through with that. In response to your second part with SEL, I can share just a little bit. You can all read news and get more information than I can with things that you may have read about SEL in math textbooks being one of the hot topics. It hasn't come down to us other than that. And one of the things that when we look at social and emotional learning, it's in every classroom. It's good teaching, it's good relationships, it's good bringing in that sense of belonging. So even if we weren't teaching SEL, it's still there. You're still bringing in the awareness and how to deal when you're frustrated, or that growth mindset. So I also can share that the SEL standards that we have, there's a crosswalk that ties in with a state mandate of the health mandates for character education. So those aren't going away anywhere anytime soon. SEL is partnering with those directly and indirectly. So that's about all I can say as it relates to SEL with that. We are in interesting times. That's probably where I'll end.
Okay, that we are. Thank you, Carolyn. Thanks, Gus. Valerie.
Hi, Carolyn.
Hi, Valerie. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you as well. I wonder if you could explain a little more a couple of things, two key issues that come to mind. The difference perhaps you experienced from what I understand the mind-body medicine team did, they came in with funding. And so the difference between what actually gets implemented and a chance to grow and be cultivated with funding versus programs that do not come in with the funding. I think there is certainly a difference. And if you have any thoughts about how those that are not directly funded, how you could make that work better, or how that might be able to be incorporated better. And then the other question I have, because from my own experience, I think people often don't understand the difference between SEL, the approach coming from the more cognitive approach, versus the mindfulness approach. And so they're different. And I heard you say a couple of times how you're teaching both SEL and the mindfulness together. And so I'm wondering how you're doing that based on my understanding of the mindfulness coming from the inside out, the resources, the wisdom from within, versus the SEL coming from the textbook or the teacher, more cognitive.
Thanks, Valerie. Great questions and a great reflection. If we think about the programs that are funded, and you look at a procurement process where I mentioned things like it needs to be research-based or evidence-based, that's one part of it. It needs to fit a certain criteria where the students would be kept safe, their data, their privacy, the implementation steps of it all, that there might be training involved so that the staff can have what they need to fully implement well. If there's a data collection piece so that you can see the programmatic and, is it being used, and then the impact of it as well. So one of the things that if we look at this, and we use the model of CMBM. CMBM came in with all, if not most of those things. So they had a package ready to go that matched a grant or grants that were like, hey, we need to help with this. We're in the middle of a pandemic. We're in the middle of a traumatic situation. We have whatever the needs be. So that's one of the pieces, is to have organizations, and this may be where we look at MBSR. If we're all MBSR teachers, we might be in our own little pocket, but if there was an organization, and I know there are some out there, I think Mindful Leaders, for example, where they have it ready to go, and they have the insurance, and they have the packet ready to do the necessary sales pitch on this valuable offering. It's easier to come in with that, in particular when there is funding available, a grant, ESSER funds, or things like that that are available now, versus someone saying, oh, I'm trained in this. Can I come into your district and run this or share this? It's like, well, who are you? Do you have all these things in place that I just mentioned? So that may be one of the things, is that yes, if funding is available, to have that necessary logistics in place. In particular, we're a large district, so our needs for the paperwork to back everything up are higher than a smaller district might have, or a private school or something like that. So the needs might be different. So that might be something, if that addresses what you were going towards. The second part of the cognitive differences, or how SEL and mindfulness are partnered up, the way we work, the organizational part, is that we're part of school counseling and BRACE. That currently is the department that we're in. So it's provided through often school counseling, and then the training to the educators and teachers. And the trainings for SEL are separate and deliberate. The trainings for mindfulness are separate and deliberate, but then they're all brought in together as well, the overlap of that. So when we talk about mindfulness, when we often will use John Kabat-Zinn's definition, paying attention, on purpose, and all of those details. It's awareness is how we'll simplify that for students. So that awareness piece, and practicing it, so that you build it up. That's one of the ways that we do, maybe it differentiates mindfulness from SEL. So with the SEL, there's explicit lessons, there's a scope and sequence. There are we do an SEL survey across the district, where we had 80,000 students last year that gave us data that says, oh, social awareness was one of the areas of highest needed growth. So then we can target that. So if it's a scope and sequence, if it's targeting specific needs, if it's targeting even specific students that may have some behavioral interventions that are needed, or lessons that needed, the teacher can go in, or the school counselor can go in and bring in a lesson on that part of the social emotional learning. If they come in with anxiety, if they come in with, I'm really riled up because I've got this test and I don't know what to do, then mindfulness can be one of those tools as well. So I hear what you're saying, and to differentiate those, where mindfulness becomes that practice of awareness, of noticing, of helping yourself downshift or get into that place where you're not in fight or flight, where you can respond. And the social emotional learning then takes it even wider into the social situations, the academic learning situations, and those skills that are needed for life and beyond as well. So there's an overlap, and we're working on some kind of graphic organizer to figure out how this all goes, but there's a clear overlap for mindfulness and SEL, but then there's also a differentiation for them as well. Hope that helped get to what you were asking for. So.
Okay, thank you, Valerie. Thank you, Carolyn. It's been a real blessing to have you here today and hear about this work that is going to change the trajectory of young people's lives in a way that, as we talked about before, we wish we had this at that stage of life. So thank you very much. Many blessings. And if you're watching this, we will also continue on our Zoom session now with our mindfulness teachers. So if you're a mindfulness teacher and would like to join us, you can send me an email and we can arrange for that, for you to be here live on Sundays. And we'll look forward to seeing you as we can. And thank you again, Carolyn. It's a real pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Alan, and thank you for all the great work that this community is doing. I appreciate that, and I wish you all well.
Thank you.
Click down below to join our Mindfulness Teacher Community Facebook group, where you're also invited to post and share. Also, subscribe to Sing to the Mountain Studio so you don't miss out on future recordings of live sessions.